Can you believe it? High school dropout in this day and age? Come on, bro-in-law.
Tyler's older brother sneered, his words dripping with disdain.
I'm the future CEO of our company, you know. It's just unbearable to think about becoming family with someone so poor.
He continued, his face twisted in a grimace of disgust. These were the kind of remarks I, Ethan Sullivan, constantly endured from my sister's fiancé's older brother. Despite the cruel words, I always bit my tongue and endured it. Why? Because my little sister, Lily, seemed genuinely happy. Even when these hurtful comments were made, she just offered an apologetic smile, her eyes shining with happiness. That was enough for me to swallow my pride and bear it. My name is Ethan Sullivan, and I'm 35 years old. Just as Tyler's brother so tactfully pointed out, I am indeed a high school dropout, currently employed at a luxury resort. But let me tell you, it wasn't by choice that I didn't finish high school or go to college like everyone else. Growing up in a small town in Minnesota, I had dreams like any other kid. I wanted to graduate high school, maybe even go to college and make something of myself. But life had other plans for me. Reality hit hard, and I had to drop out of high school to start working. It wasn't just about me. I had a little sister to take care of. You see, Lily and I didn't have a typical childhood. We never knew our father. Mom never really talked about him, and by the time I was old enough to understand, he was long gone from our lives. It was just the three of us, Mom, Lily, and me. Our family wasn't well off by any means. We lived in a tiny, rundown apartment on the outskirts of town. Most days, our meals consisted of nothing but ramen noodles or canned beans. It wasn't much, but Mom always made sure we had something to eat, even if it meant she went hungry herself. Despite our financial struggles, Mom was determined to keep us in school and give us a semblance of normalcy. She'd scrub floors and wash dishes at local diners, working long hours just to keep a roof over our heads. I remember how she'd come home late at night, her hands red and raw from cleaning, but she still managed to smile for us. "Ethan, Lily," she'd say, her voice tired but warm. "How was school today?" We'd tell her about our day, and for a moment, it felt like we were just a regular family, not one teetering on the edge of poverty. But things started to change when I was in high school. Mom began using expensive makeup and going out late at night. I couldn't understand it. We could barely afford food. If she was spending money on cosmetics, it didn't make sense to me. I'd lie awake at night listening to the sound of her high heels clicking on the pavement as she left, wondering where she was going and when she'd be back. Sometimes I'd hear her crying softly in her room when she thought we were asleep. It broke my heart, but I didn't know how to help. Then the worst happened. I was 15, just starting my sophomore year of high school, and Lily was only 5. One day, I came home from school to find our apartment eerily quiet. Mom was gone. She had left us, run off with some man she'd met. Just like that, our little family was torn apart. The apartment was practically empty. Mom had taken most of the furniture and appliances probably to sell for quick cash. There was barely any food left in the pantry. And there, in the middle of our barren living room, sat Lily, her big brown eyes brimming with tears. "Ethan?" she whimpered. "Where's Mommy?" I didn't have an answer for her. How could I explain to a 5-year-old that our mother had abandoned us, that she had chosen a man over her own children? The pain and anger I felt in that moment were overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, but I couldn't. I had to be strong for Lily. I knelt down beside her, pulling her in a tight hug. "It's okay, Lily," I whispered, even though I knew it wasn't. "We'll be okay, I promise." From that day on, it was just Lily and me against the world. I was furious at Mom, filled with a burning hatred for what she'd done to us. But hatred wouldn't put food on the table or keep a roof over our heads. We needed money, and fast. I threw myself into finding work. Before school, I delivered newspapers, pedaling my old bike through the quiet streets of our town as the sun rose. After school, I rushed to a local diner where I'd wash dishes and bus tables until well past midnight. The work was exhausting, but I didn't have a choice. We had to survive. Every night I come home to find Lily alone, often with tear-stained cheeks. It broke my heart to leave her by herself for so long. But what else could I do? We had no other family to turn to, no safety net to catch us. Despite my best efforts, the money I earned from my part-time job was barely enough to keep us afloat. We were living hand to mouth, never knowing if we have enough for the next day. Stress was overwhelming, and there were nights when I cried silently into my pillow, wondering how we'd make it through another week. But every morning, I'd wake up, put on a brave face, and tell Lily, "Smile, Lily. Everything will be okay." I don't know if I truly believed it myself, but I had to give her hope. I had to make her believe that no matter how hard things got, we'd get through it together. As the months went by, it became clear that something had to give. I was falling behind in school, too exhausted from work to focus on my studies. My grades were slipping, and my teachers were starting to notice. But what choice did I have? It was either my education or our survival. With a heavy heart, I made the decision to drop out of high school. It felt like I was giving up on my dreams, but I knew it was necessary. Lily needed me, and I was determined to give her a better life than the one we'd had. However, finding full-time work as a high school dropout proved to be much harder than I anticipated. I spent days making phone calls, filling out applications, and going door to door, begging for any job that would take me. But everywhere I went, I was met with the same response. "Sorry, kid. We don't hire dropouts." It was a harsh lesson in how cruel the world could be. Here I was, barely 16, trying to support my little sister, and doors were being slammed in my face left and right. The rejection was crushing, and there were moments when I felt like giving up. One particularly tough day, after being turned down for what felt like the 100th time, I found myself sitting in a park, feeling utterly defeated. Lily and I hadn't eaten properly in days, and I was at my wit's end. That's when a man approached me. He was older, probably in his 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Without a word, he handed me a paper bag. Inside were a sandwich and a bottle of water. I was so hungry and grateful that I couldn't help but burst into tears as I ate. The man introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, sat with me and listened as I poured out my story. I told him about Mom leaving, about dropping out of high school to take care of Lily, about our struggles to make ends meet. He listened without judgment, his eyes filled with compassion. When I finished talking, Mr. Thompson placed a hand on my shoulder and said,
"You've been incredibly brave, Ethan. How would you like to come work for me? I own a resort not far from here, and we could use some of your determination."
I couldn't believe my ears. Was this really happening? It seemed too good to be true. Mr. Thompson must have sensed my disbelief because he chuckled and said,
"Come on, let me show you the place."
He led me to a beautiful resort nestled in the countryside, just a short drive from our town. I'd seen it from afar but never dreamed I'd ever set foot inside. It was the kind of place where rich people went for vacations, a world away from the life Lily and I knew. Mr. Thompson took me to meet the resort's owner, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Winters. I was terrified, certain that she'd take one look at me, a scruffy, uneducated kid, and send me packing. But to my surprise, she listened intently as I stumbled through my story. When I finished speaking, Mrs. Winters looked me straight in the eyes and said, "How would you like to work here, Ethan? We can offer you a live-in position, and of course, your sister's welcome to stay as well." I was speechless. All I could do was nod vigorously and stammer out a, "Yes, thank you. I'll work hard, I promise." The very next day, Lily and I moved into a small but comfortable room at the resort. It was more than we could ever have hoped for. We had a roof over our heads, warm beds to sleep in, and most importantly, we were together. My first few weeks at the resort were challenging. I had never worked in hospitality before, and there was so much to learn. From the proper way to greet guests, to the intricacies of setting a formal dining table, every day brought new lessons. I made plenty of mistakes in those early days. I'd forget the correct way to address guests, mix up room service orders, or fumble while carrying trays of drinks. Each error was met with a stern correction from Mrs. Winters or one of the senior staff members. But I didn't let it discourage me. Instead, I saw each mistake as an opportunity to prove myself. Despite the long hours and demanding work, I threw myself into the job with everything I had. I was determined to prove that Mrs. Winters hadn't made a mistake in hiring me. More than that, I was driven by the desire to give Lily a better life. As the weeks turned into months, I began to find my footing. Staff who had initially been skeptical of the young dropout in their midst started to warm up to me. They saw how hard I worked, how eager I was to learn, and gradually began to take me under their wing. Mr. Thompson, who had first brought me to the resort, became something of a mentor to me. He taught me about the finer points of customer service, how to anticipate guest needs before they even realize them themselves.
The key to this business,
He'd say,
is making people feel special. Everyone who walks through those doors should feel like royalty.
Mrs. Winters, for all her stern demeanor, proved to be a fair and supportive boss. She pushed me hard, expecting nothing less than excellence, but she also recognized my efforts. When I mastered a new skill or received a compliment from a guest, she'd give me a rare smile and a nod of approval. Those small gestures meant the world to me. As I grew more comfortable in my role, I began to learn about the finer things in life, things I had never been exposed to before. I learned about wine pairings and gourmet cuisine, about designer fashion and luxury cars. It was like stepping into a whole new world. But even as I immersed myself in this new environment, I never forgot where I came from or why I was doing this. Every penny I earned went towards making life better for Lily. When she started elementary school, I was able to buy her a brand new backpack and school supplies. The look of joy on her face when she saw that shiny new backpack is something I'll never forget. Lily thrived in our new environment. The resort staff doted on her, and she quickly became everyone's favorite little helper. On weekends, she followed me around as I worked, chattering away about her school and her friends. Seeing her happy and well cared for made all the long hours and hard work worth it. One day, Lily saw a woman at the resort receiving a massive bouquet of roses as part of a proposal. Her eyes went wide with wonder. She tugged on my sleeve, whispering, "Ethan, I want to be like that someday, getting beautiful roses from someone who loves me." From that day on, I made it a tradition to buy Lily a single rose for her birthday each year. It wasn't much, but the way her face lit up every time made me feel like I was giving her the world. As the years passed, I continued to work hard and save every extra dollar I could. I was determined that Lily would have the opportunities I didn't, to finish high school and to go to college if she wanted. I juggled our finances carefully, making sure we had enough for the essentials, while squirreling away as much as I could for Lily's future. Before I knew it, 20 years had flown by. I was still working at the resort, having worked my way up from a general helper to a respected member of the management team. Lily had graduated from college and at 25 was working as a social worker in the city, helping families who were struggling just like we once had. I couldn't have been prouder of the woman she'd become. She was compassionate, hardworking, and determined to make a difference in the world. "I want to help people who are struggling like we were," she'd tell me. "I want to be there for them the way you were there for me." One sunny afternoon, Lily called me, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Ethan, I have someone I want you to meet. Can you come by the resort this weekend?" I knew Lily had been seeing someone for a while, but she'd been pretty tight-lipped about the details. "Sure," I said, trying to keep the curiosity out of my voice. "Is this the mysterious boyfriend I've been hearing so little about?" Lily laughed, a sound that always warmed my heart. "Maybe," she teased. "Just be nice, okay?" That weekend, Lily arrived at the resort hand in hand with a tall, handsome young man. "Ethan, this is Tyler," she said, her eyes shining. "Tyler, this is my brother Ethan." Tyler stepped forward, extending his hand.
It's great to finally meet you, Ethan, he said warmly. Lily's told me so much about you.
As we sat down to talk, I couldn't help but notice how happy Lily looked. She practically glowed as she sat next to Tyler, their hands intertwined. It was clear that this was more than just a casual relationship. My suspicions were confirmed when Lily cleared her throat nervously and said, "Ethan, we actually have some news. Tyler and I, we're engaged." For a moment, I was speechless. My little sister? Engaged? It seemed impossible. But as I looked at the joy on her face, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. "Congratulations, Lily," I finally managed to say, pulling her into a tight hug. "I'm so happy for you both." As we celebrated their engagement, Tyler filled me in on his background. He was the second son of a successful businessman who owned a large food distribution company.
We actually supply to this resort,
Tyler mentioned.
Small world, huh?
I have to admit, I felt a twinge of insecurity hearing about Tyler's background. Here I was, a high school dropout who had worked his way up from nothing, and my sister was marrying into a wealthy family. But I pushed those feelings aside. All that mattered was Lily's happiness. As the evening wore on, Lily pulled me aside. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft, "I have a favor to ask. This resort has been such a big part of our lives. So many of our memories are here. I was wondering, do you think we could have the wedding here?" I felt a lump in my throat. The fact that Lily wanted to get married here, and the place that had given us the second chance at life, meant more to me than I could express. "Of course," I said, blinking back tears. "I'll talk to Mrs. Winters tomorrow. I'm sure she'll be thrilled." The next day, I approached Mrs. Winters with Lily's request. To my surprise and delight, she was overjoyed at the idea. "Ethan," she said, her usually stern face breaking into a wide smile, "nothing would make me happier than to host Lily's wedding. We'll make it a day to remember." Over the next few months, the entire resort staff threw themselves into wedding preparations. Everyone who had watched Lily grow up wanted to contribute in some way. The chef was experimenting with new recipes for the wedding cake. The gardeners were planning special flower arrangements. And even the housekeeping staff was coming up with ideas for unique decorations. As the wedding day approached, I found myself filled with a mix of emotions. I was overjoyed for Lily, of course, but there was also a sense of anxiety gnawing at me. I was about to meet Tyler's family, and I couldn't help but worry about how they would react to me. A high school dropout who had raised his sister while working in a resort. The day of the family meetup arrived, and I dressed in my best suit, the one I usually reserved for greeting VIP guests at the resort. I wanted to make a good impression, not for my sake, but for Lily's. We gathered in one of the resort's private dining rooms. Tyler's parents arrived first, his father, a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, and his mother, elegant and poised. They greeted Lily warmly, but I could feel their eyes appraising me as Tyler introduced us.
"Mr. and Mrs. Robinson, this is Ethan Sullivan, Lily's brother,"
Tyler said. I extended in my hand, trying to keep it from shaking. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," I said, summoning all the etiquette lessons I learned over the years at the resort. Mrs. Robinson smiled politely, but Mr. Robinson's handshake was firm, his gaze scrutinying. "So, Ethan," he said, "Tyler tells me you work here at the resort." Before I could answer, the door burst open, and in strode a man who could only be Tyler's older brother. He was the spitting image of Tyler, where Tyler's face was kind. His brothers held a look of arrogant disdain.
"Sorry I'm late,"
he announced, not sounding sorry at all.
"Traffic was a nightmare. So where's this brother-in-law I've been hearing about?"
Tyler stepped forward, looking uncomfortable.
"Jack, this is Ethan, Lily's brother."
Jack's eyes swept over me, and I could see the moment he registered my less-than-designer suit, my calloused hands. A smirk spread across his face.
"So, you're the high school dropout I've been hearing about,"
he said, his voice dripping with condensation.
"Tell me, how does someone with no education end up working at a place like this? Must be nice living off the tips from rich people."
I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment and anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I've been fortunate to work here for many years," I said evenly. "It's given me the opportunity to provide for Lily and myself." Jack snorted.
"Provide? Please, Liz is about to marry into our family. She won't need anything from you anymore."
I saw Lily's face fall, her eyes filling with hurt. Tyler stepped in, his voice tight with barely contained anger.
"Jack, that's enough. Ethan has done an amazing job raising Lily. He deserves our respect."
But Jack wasn't done. He turned to his parents, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear.
"Can you believe this? We're actually going to be related to someone who couldn't even finish high school. All our business associates say.
The room fell silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. And for a moment, I was that scared 15-year-old boy again, alone and overwhelmed. But then I looked at Lily, saw the mix of anger and sadness on her face, and I knew I had to be strong for her. Mr. and Mrs. Robinson? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I know my background isn't what you might have hoped for an in-law, but I've worked hard every day of my life to give Lily the opportunities I never had. She's grown into an incredible woman, and I couldn't be prouder of her. Tyler's parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite read, but before they could say anything, Jack spoke up again.
Spare us the Hallmark movie speech, he sneered. Face it, you're just not in our league. Yeah, I mean, come on. The wedding at the place you work? How tacky is that?
I saw Lily open her mouth to argue, but I gently shook my head. This was supposed to be a happy time for her, and I didn't want it marred by family drama. You're right, I said quietly. I'm not in your league. I'm just a guy who's done his best to take care of his sister. If my presence at the wedding would make things uncomfortable, I won't attend. Ethan, no! Lily cried, but I held up my hand to stop her. It's okay, Lily, I said, forcing a smile. This is your day. I want it to be perfect for you, without any tension or drama. I'll be here at the resort, making sure everything runs smoothly, but I won't attend as a guest. With that, I excused myself from the room, ignoring Lily's protests and the stunned looks on everyone's faces. As I closed the door behind me, I leaned against the wall, my heart heavy. I had always known this day would come, the day when the disparity between Lily's new life and our humble beginnings would become glaringly apparent. But I hadn't expected it to hurt quite this much. Over the next few weeks, Lily tried to repeatedly change my mind. She'd call or stop by the resort, her eyes pleading as she begged me to reconsider. Ethan, please, she'd say. It won't be the same without you there. I want my big brother standing beside me on the biggest day of my life. Each time, it took every ounce of willpower I had to stand firm. Lily, I'd explain gently, I'll be there in spirit, cheering you on. But this is your day, and I don't want anything to overshadow that. I'll make sure everything is perfect from behind the scenes. Despite my reassurances, I could see the sadness in Lily's eyes. It broke my heart, but I truly believed I was doing what was best for her. I didn't want her wedding day tainted by family attention or snide remarks from Jack. As the wedding day approached, the entire resort was a flurry of activity. Mrs. Winters had pulled out all the stops, determined to make this the most spectacular wedding the resort had ever seen. I threw myself into the preparations, working longer hours than ever to ensure every detail was perfect. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts of Lily. I remember the little girl who used to follow me around the resort, the teenager who confided her dreams to me, the young woman who'd worked so hard to become a social worker, and now she's getting married. As dawn broke, I got up and made my way to the resort's gardens. The florists were already there, setting up an arch of white roses, Lily's favorite. I helped them, carefully arranging each bloom, pouring all my love for my sister into the simple task. When the ceremony began, I watched from a distance as guests filed into the garden. I saw Tyler's parents looking proud and slightly uncomfortable. I saw Jack already looking bored and checking his watch. And then, I saw Lily. She was radiant in her white dress, her face glowing with happiness. As she walked down the aisle on Tyler's arm, I felt a lump form in my throat. My little sister, all grown up and starting her own family. I wanted nothing more to be standing there with the other guests, cheering her on. But I had made my decision, and I stuck to it. Instead, I coordinated with the kitchen staff, making sure the reception dinner was prepared to perfection. I oversaw the setup of the ballroom, ensuring every centerpiece was just right, every place card correctly positioned. As the reception began, I could hear the music and laughter floating through the resort. I busied myself with work, trying not to think about what I was missing. But then, during a lull in the kitchen, I snuck up to the ballroom and peeked in through a side door. Lily was in the middle of the dance floor, twirling in Tyler's arms. She was laughing, her face alight with joy. For a moment, our eyes met across the room. I saw her smile falter, saw her take a step towards me. but I shook my head slightly and mouthed the words I had said to her so many times over the years. Smile, Lily. She paused, then nodded, her eyes filling with tears even as she smiled. Then Tyler whisked her away into another dance move and the moment was gone. I retreated back to the kitchen, my heart heavy but knowing I had done the right thing. Lily was happy, and that was all that mattered. The evening wore on, and I heard snippets of the speeches and toasts. I winced as I heard Jack's slurred voice of the microphone, clearly having too much to drink. But then I heard something that made me freeze.
And now,
The DJ announced.
the bride would like to say a few words.
I couldn't help myself. I crept back up to the ballroom, positioning myself where I could see and hear without being noticed. Lily stood at the microphone, her eyes scanning the crowd. I want to thank everyone for being here today, she began, her voice steady. But there's someone very important who isn't here, and I need to talk about him. My breath caught in my throat as Lily continued. My brother Ethan raised me from the time I was 5 years old. He dropped out of high school to work and provide for me. He sacrificed everything to make sure I had opportunities he never had. I saw Tyler's parents shift uncomfortably in their seats. Jack was scowling, but Lily didn't seem to notice. Ethan taught me what it means to work hard, to never give up, to always help others. He showed me that family isn't about blood or social status. It's about love and sacrifice. Lily's voice broke, and I saw tears streaming down her face. Ethan, I know you can hear me. You've always been there for me, even when you thought I couldn't see you. You're not just my brother. You're my hero. The room erupted in applause. I saw many guests wiping away tears. Even Tyler's parents looked moved. Before I knew what was happening, Mrs. Winters was at my side. Go, she said softly, giving me a gentle push towards the ballroom. Your sister needs you. In a daze, I walked into the ballroom. The crowd parted and I suddenly was face to face with Lily. Without a word, she threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Ethan, she whispered. I should have insisted you be here. You're the most important person in my life. I hugged her tightly, my own eyes filling with tears. It's okay, Lily, I said. I'm here now. As we stood there, the room fell silent. Then slowly, people began to applaud. I looked up to see Tyler's parents approaching us. Ethan, Mr. Robinson said, his voice gruff of emotion. We owe you an apology. We judged you without knowing you, and that was wrong. Anyone who could raise such an extraordinary young woman must be extraordinary himself. Mrs. Robinson nodded, adding, We'd be honored to welcome you to our family. I was overwhelmed, unable to find words. Lily squeezed my hand, smiling through her tears, and I knew everything would be okay. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I danced with Lily, laughed with Tyler, and even shared a civil conversation with Jack, who seemed subdued after Lily's speech. As the night wound down, Mrs. Winters approached me. Ethan, she said, her eyes twinkling. I think it's time we had to talk about your future here at the resort. I looked at her, confused. My future? She nodded. You've shown exceptional leadership and dedication over the years. I think it's time we discuss grooming you for a management position. Perhaps even my successor? I was speechless. Me, a potential manager of the resort? It seemed impossible. But as I looked around at the smiling faces of my coworkers, at Lily beaming with pride, I realized that anything was possible. Years have passed since that night. Lily and Tyler are happily married with 2 children of their own. They started a foundation to help underprivileged youth, inspired by our own story. As for me, I'm still at the resort. But now, I'm the general manager, working alongside Mrs. Winters to run the place that gave me a second chance at life. Every day I walk through these halls, remembering the scared teenager I once was, marveling at how far I've come. But more than any title or achievement, what makes me the proudest is the family we've built. Not just Lily and her new family, but the family we've created here at the resort. Because I've learned that family isn't about where you come from or what you have. It's about the love you share and the people who stand by you no matter what. And every day, I make sure to remind myself and others of the words that got us through the toughest times. Smile. Everything will be okay.